From enchanted, magical forests to treacherous snowy mountains, haunted ghost ships, fiery volcanoes, and basically anything else that your mind can imagine, JRPGs certainly pack quite the adventure. Despite there actually being a genre called adventure, in my opinion, I don't think any other genre really captures that spirit of adventure quite like an epic JRPG can. I think this is largely due to the vast array of unique locations they bring you to, along with the grand scale of their world-traveling journeys. For the most part, that is. Not all JRPGs embody that grand sense of adventure, but this video is gonna focus on the ones that do. Obviously, these are just my opinions, as the topic's not objectively definable. However, I do think I cover some of the more popular examples here. So, without further ado, let's just get into it. Here's a list of 8 great JRPGs that capture the spirit of adventure. To start this list off, we have Lunar, Silver Star Story. There were 3 games that instantly came to mind when thinking of this video, didn't even have to think twice about it, and Lunar was definitely one of them. The second game in the series, Eternal Blue, could apply here as well, but I want to wait to talk about that one in a future video, so I'm just gonna focus on the first one here. I think it captures that spirit of adventure just a tiny bit better anyway. Silver Star Story was developed by Game Arts and Studio Alex, and has seen various iterations of it over the years. There's the original Sega CD version, the updated PlayStation version, the watered-down Game Boy Advance port, and finally, the PSP remake. All of these versions have their redeeming qualities, and it's just gonna come down to preference. Well, except for the GBA port, that is. It's widely considered the worst of the bunch and butchered down a lot of content. It is the first version I played, and I know some of you are thinking, God, you poor soul. So I'm actually quite partial to the big, colorful character sprites, but looking back in hindsight, I definitely get the criticisms. I know there's a good amount of people that do prefer the original Sega CD version due to how they handled some story scenes and whatnot, but I'ma be honest. I haven't played that version, so can't really talk about it. I have played the PlayStation version though, and that one's damn good. It does have a brighter color palette overall, which really helps with that adventurous feel. Anyway, on to the actual game. Silver Star Story is a coming-of-age tale following our protagonist, Alex, as he journeys the world, inspired by his hero, Dragon Master Dine. Of course, it dives into deeper stuff from there, but that's the main premise at least. At the core, the story is pretty simple, but it's really just the charm of the game's world and characters that make this one feel so special. From your beautifully voiced blue-haired love interest, to a cocky mage, a quiet mage, a feisty priestess, a drinking, womanizing bandit leader with a heart of gold, and a super compelling antagonist, the cast is all just so lovable and endearing. Plus, to my knowledge, it may just be the first RPG to feature a cute little animal companion, at least one that's so important to the story. It just kinda helps with that childlike wonder and charm, you know? But yeah, overall, I'm a huge fan of the character design in this game. It really exemplifies that classic 90s anime aesthetic, and if you know me, you would know I'm all about that. In fact, there's like an hour's worth of animation in this version, which really helps with the immersion factor and sense of adventure. The music is also extremely good, with some gorgeous vocal tracks doing a fantastic job of setting the mood when it needs to. The atmosphere the music and visuals come together to create is just so damn charming. It's pretty easy to tell the amounts of heart and passion that went into making this game. The same goes for Working Design's translation of it. I mean, just look at this packaging for God's sake. So much extra cool stuff here. There's no way that looking at this cloth map doesn't spark at least some part of your adventurous imagination, especially as a kid. The manual is hardbound and is super colorful and detailed, complete with interviews from the devs, and even an in-depth guide for the first part of the game. You can say what you want about all their translation liberties and pop culture references. I totally get why some people wouldn't like those, but I think it's pretty obvious they very much cared about their projects. Also included was an OST of the game and a Making of Lunar CD. I just watched this again for this video, and it was really interesting to see the behind the scenes process. It just reiterates the notion of how much effort all the devs and translation team put into making this release so special. The whole thing is just a comfy watch and looks like a really wholesome environment and can be found in its entirety on YouTube, so I recommend checking it out if interested. Even if Alex's voice actor kept calling it a cartoon and making seemingly sarcastic remarks about the pay.
And I like to be the guy that saves everybody, especially Luna, and she's a pretty hot cartoon. It's a lot of fun, being in the recording studio, doing this kind of thing, being the voice of, a cartoon, basically. It's acting. And I got a nice shirt out of the whole thing, which is kind of cool. I can say, hey, I was in that game. I won't have a nice car to drive or any other clothes to wear, but I'll have the shirt.
Like, bruh, if you're not gonna appreciate the shirt, give me that shit instead. Shit, next time I'm out with friends, I'll rock that with pride and be the coolest dude there. Coming up next, we have Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch. Ni no Kuni was developed by Level 5 and was originally released for the PS3, but has since seen ports to the Switch, PS4, and PC. One look at this game and it should be pretty easy to see why it's on this list. As if it wasn't obvious, the legendary Studio Ghibli was involved in the development of this game, and it absolutely shows through the gorgeous visuals. Seriously, Studio Ghibli is like a master of creating magical and adventurous atmospheres, and this one is no exception. It absolutely nails that feeling. The world is just so vibrant and filled with so many colorful, diverse locations. It's also one of the last JRPGs to feature a traditional overworld map, and with the generation that it came out in, it's easily one of the prettiest ones out there, if not the prettiest. It just really helps with the grand scale of the game. Story-wise, it follows the young lad Oliver as he gets transported to a foreign fantasy world and tries to bring back his mother. It's not just like a standard isekai though. The fantasy world has ties and connections to the real-life world, which gets explored a lot in-game. Overall, I really enjoy the story in this game, as it has a lot of super emotional moments. You may be playing as a kid, but the themes are anything but kiddish. The concept of death is never easy, and this game handles it very well. Between the presentation and the heavy themes that it covers, the developers strive to make this one appeal to both younger and older gamers alike, and I think they did a great job here. I played this for the first time in college, and the story still emotionally resonated with me. The combat is sort of like a combination of turn-based and real-time, and it has this Pokemon-like system where you have the ability to catch monsters, or familiars as the game calls them, where each party member fights with a team of 3 of them and can evolve them through various means. The gameplay is really addictive, I think, and the Pokemon nature of it only adds to that adventurous feel. There was a sequel to Ni no Kuni, but I'ma be real with you, I haven't gotten around to playing it yet. I have heard it's not quite as good as the first one, but I will play it myself eventually to form my own opinion. But yeah, if you're looking to get lost in a vivid fantasy world, then I can't recommend this one enough. The next game we have on our list is Golden Sun. Golden Sun was developed by Camelot and was released for the Game Boy Advance. Right off the bat, I'm just gonna say the fact that a handheld RPG captured the spirit of adventure similarly to a console RPG makes this one even more impressive. It's kind of hard to narrow down how it exactly accomplishes that, but I'm gonna try my best to explain. As with most games on this list, the world is just filled with a variety of diverse settings. A lot of the music composed by Motoi Sakuraba just has like this grand, adventurous feel to it. And the story gradually feels more epic as it takes you from humble beginnings all across various lands. Visually, there's a lot of charm in the game, and I'm a huge fan of how it looks. Environments are colorful, character sprites are animated well, and the spell animations during battle look really good. Another big reason why this game feels so magical is the Jin system. Jin are basically just like these little magical creatures that you find scattered across the world that grant you various abilities and stat bonuses upon finding them or beating them in battle. There are Jin of different element types, each having different effects on the kind of abilities you learn, abilities in this game being called Psi Energy. Not only that, but the combination of elemental Jin you have equipped on a character can change their class type as well. Back to Psi Energy though. In addition to acting like a traditional magic system, it also plays a huge role in exploration, dungeons, and puzzle solving. This added a lot to gameplay and was a pretty unique take on stuff like the tools system from the Wild Arms series. It definitely helped it stand out amongst its peers. Golden Sun did have a sequel, The Lost Age, which is essentially just a direct continuation of the story from the first game. You do play as some different characters, but yeah, it's very much in the same universe, continuing the same plot. The game is bigger, longer, and in some people's eyes, better, but in my opinion, I'm actually of the camp that prefers the first one due to its shorter length and pacing. They're both excellent games though, and well worth checking out today. Coming up next, we have Skies of Arcadia Legends. When I mentioned earlier how there were 3 games that I instantly thought of when thinking of this video, this is another one of them. Skies of Arcadia was developed by Overworks, which was basically just a smaller developmental department of Sega, and was released for the GameCube. The original version did actually come out for the Dreamcast, but the GameCube version has a lot more content and its own down encounter rate, so I'm just going to talk about that one here. It's like the definitive version anyway. In Skies of Arcadia, you play as Vice, a dashing, charismatic air pirate who travels all across the world on his airship, discovering new lands. You know what, I'm just gonna say it. Vice is one of my favorite protagonists ever. He's just like a really likable and positive guy without being all annoying and in your face about it. And the rest of the cast is really likable and charming as well. Overall, just great chemistry, really. While the characters are great, it's really the setting and atmosphere where this game truly shines. Being that you are a pirate, exploration is obviously heavily encouraged. It has you traveling all over the world, venturing into uncharted territories and making new discoveries. Between this and all of the diverse locations influenced by different moon and element types, the sense of wonder and exploration in this game is really like none other. In addition to the turn-based battles, there's also larger scale ship battles, which really help with that grand scope and adventurous feel. The music does a great job of this too. The way all of these elements weave together just creates this really wondrous, special experience. It's easily one of the most memorable RPGs I've ever played, and one that I can't recommend enough. The next game we have on our list, or games in this case, is The Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky, first and second chapter. Yeah, I'm cheating and including both here, but in order to experience the full adventure, you really need to play both games. I mean, the second game starts literal minutes after the first one ends. There is technically a third Trails in the Sky game, but that one follows a different protagonist and is a bit more of a dungeon crawler, so it feels a little less adventurous in that sense. It still has important lore though and worth playing at some point, just not fitting for this list. Anyway, the Trails in the Sky games were developed by Nihon Falcom and were originally released for the PSP, but have since seen ports to Steam. The Legend of Heroes as a whole is a super long-running franchise that actually got its start in the 80s and has seen multiple sub-series within it since then. With that said though, these first 2 Trails in the Sky games pretty much restarted the series with a brand new universe, characters, and overarching story that's still going on to this day. Like seriously, the lore in this game is 10 plus games deep at this point, and the deepest out of any JRPG series ever, to my knowledge. As big as the series is now, however, in my opinion, none of them capture the spirit of adventure better than these first 2 games. The story of Estelle and Joshua and their journeys in becoming top-tier bracers is just filled with so much charm, wonder, and adventure. Estelle is a fantastic example of a female protagonist done right, and quite possibly my favorite in the genre. Her coming-of-age tale is just handled so well and is a lot of fun watching her grow and mature. Joshua is a really compelling and great character too, as is really the whole cast in this game. They're all just so likable, and I really love their relationships between each other. You know, at first I was hesitant to include these games, because unlike a lot of other games on this list, they don't take you across the whole world, but instead just a region on a continent. With that said, the way in which the story unfolds, along with the locations that you do visit, still manage to give it a really adventurous feel. That's quite the feat, in my opinion. In addition to everything I've said thus far, I think this is also helped by the bright, charming graphics and the really incredible music. These are definitely some super comfy OSTs. To some people, the combat in these games may feel a little bit dated compared to the more recent entries in the series, but I still really enjoy the level of depth, customization, and strategy they allow for. I played the first game in college at a time where I felt like I had already played most of the classics from that generation, so I was extremely happy to find out that this was not the case, and that these stood toe-to-toe with some of the best in the genre. I remember reading a lot of hype on forums going into them, and I think they lived up to it, even if I had to wait like 5 years for second chapter to get localized, but I know the translation team was working their asses off, and it was well worth the wait. They're two of the finest out there, so check them out. Coming up next, we have Dragon Quest VIII: Journey of the Cursed King. A lot of Dragon Quest games could definitely apply here, but in my opinion, this is the one that captures the spirit of adventure the best. Entries like 11 are pretty close, but I've talked about that one a lot on the channel before, and want to give some love to 8. Dragon Quest VIII was developed by Level 5 and was initially released for the PS2, but has since seen a port/remake to the 3DS. Honestly, it's really hard to say what the better version is here, and it's just gonna come down to preference. The 3DS version does have some additional content, extra playable characters, some quality of life improvements, and visible monsters on screen, unlike the original. Now, these are very big changes, don't get me wrong, but I know there's some people out there that don't like the visible monsters, as it sort of trivializes encounters, taking away a lot from the survival aspect and inventory management that comes into play when random encounters are a thing. This is a pretty big reason why some people came to love Dragon Quest in the first place, so yeah, it's just gonna come down to preference. The console version does have a bit of a grander feel to it, being on a console of course, plus it naturally has better graphics, so we're just gonna use footage from that version. Between the sprawling, realistically proportioned overworld map, the beautiful and vibrant cel-shaded graphics, the adventurous orchestral music, and the charming character design of Dragon Ball creator Akira Toriyama, they all just come together to give the game a real sense of adventure. The Dragon Quest series in general is great at doing this, but for this one in particular, I really got that feeling of embarking on an epic quest. The atmosphere in this game truly is top-notch, as it's so fun to see all of the variety of locations out there. Being able to traverse the world on the back of a blazing fast saber cat and a divine, majestic god bird just makes the experience that much cooler as well. Overall, I just love this game and it's such a blast to play. It's tied as my favorite in the entire Dragon Quest series, so I highly recommend it. If nothing else, Yangus is awesome and makes the game worth playing alone. Coming up next, we have Grandia. This is the literal first game that I thought of when thinking of this list, and I'm sure the same goes for a lot of you out there as well. While some other games come really close, in my opinion, no JRPG out there captures the spirit of adventure better than the first Grandia game. It was developed by Game Arts, which if you remember from earlier in the video, was also one of the same teams behind the Lunar games. So yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that Game Arts certainly knows how to nail that adventure feel. Same with Level 5 actually, as they were behind both Ni no Kuni and Dragon Quest VIII on this list, and I just forgot to point that out earlier, so here's a random tangent about it now. Anyway, back to Grandia. Grandia initially came out on the Saturn, however it wouldn't see a North American or European release until the PlayStation port years later. In recent years, we've also seen a remaster for the Switch, which would probably be the most accessible version to get a hold of these days. The story of Grandia follows our young, energetic hero, Justin, as he aims to become the top adventurer in the world, discovering new, uncharted lands, inspired by his late father, who was also an adventurer. It does get more complex than that as bigger threats are introduced, but still, a large part of the game is all about adventure. Honestly, Justin rarely ever shuts up about adventures and stuff, so it's pretty much impossible not to get a grand sense of adventure when playing this game. I mean, shit, grand's in the title even. It's obvious that's the feeling that developers were going for, and they absolutely nailed it. Adventurous music? Check. Bright graphics and a light-hearted atmosphere? Check. A charming cast of characters filled with many different races and species? Check. A story that takes you all over the world to a variety of diverse settings and locations? You bet your ass. Grandia just does so many things right to capture the spirit of adventure. I'm also a big fan of how some party members come and go throughout the game. It's similar to real life. Not everyone in our lives are meant to stay there until the journey's end, but they still had an important reason for being there when they were and helped us learn a lesson along the way. Speaking of party members, I would be remiss if I were to talk about Grandia and not bring up the battle system. Easily one of my personal favorite JRPG battle systems ever. It's mainly turn-based, however, some actions play out in real time, allowing you to cancel enemy attacks and stuff like that. It's so much fun and leaps and bounds above most other JRPG combat from that generation. There were some other games in the Grandia series, and while entries like 2 are really good, none of them feel quite as adventurous as this one. The more lighthearted vibe may have a little something to do with it. All in all, Grandia is one of my top RPGs of all time, and I can't recommend it enough. Before we move on to the last game on this list, I want to quickly go over some honorable mentions that didn't quite make it for one reason or another. First, there's Chrono Trigger. This one absolutely would have made the list, but I feel like I've talked about it so much recently and just a lot on the channel in general. It's an amazing game, I just wanted to talk about some others. Second is Tales of Symphonia. Same thing as Chrono Trigger. Absolutely fitting for this list, but yeah, I've just talked about it a lot on the channel before, including a full retrospective over it, and wanted to give it a break. Third is Xenoblade Chronicles. This game has huge, sprawling, majestic, epic landscapes that could definitely be fitting for this list, but I wanted to talk about the last entry just a little bit more. Fourth is the Ys series. Some of the earlier entries in titles like Oath in Felghana, Ark of Napishtim, Ys 7, and Ys 8 do have a really great adventurous feel, but then there's other entries that aren't quite as grand scaled, so yeah, I just figured I would throw the series a shout out as a whole. And the last honorable mention is the entire Pokemon series. This one is pretty self-explanatory. If you played any of these games as a kid, there's no way your sense of adventure wasn't going off the charts. Setting foot on a journey to be the very best Pokemon trainer there ever was just has adventure written all over it. Pokemon Red and Blue were probably the first games to give a lot of gamers that really adventurous feel, so there's no way I couldn't include them here. Alright, to finish off this list, we have Breath of Fire 3. Breath of Fire 3 was developed by Capcom and was released for the PlayStation. The PAL region would later see a PSP port as well, but not in North America, unfortunately. The story in Breath of Fire 3 follows Ryu, a young dragon boy trying to find his place in the world. This isn't much different from the other games in the Breath of Fire series, and while entries like 4 I think are just as good, if not even better, I feel like number 3 gives off that sense of adventure the best. And here's why I think so. It's got the brightest color palette in the series, the cast of characters is so diverse and colorful, the story is deep and prompts a lot of introspection, the jazzy soundtrack does a great job elevating the mood, and, most importantly, you actually grow up in this game. When the game starts, you're just a scared little kid who has no idea how to fend for himself, which is even reflected in your attack animation. After experiencing some hardships on your journey and an eventual time skip though, you watch yourself grow into a mature, confident adult, ready to take on any challenge the world can throw at him. This reason alone is why it deserves a place on this list. Few JRPGs even do a time skip, let alone as well as it's done here. It's just icing on the cake that it's a great overall game in general, with awesome looking sprites and the best dragon transformation system in the entire series. If you haven't played this coming-of-age Capcom classic yet, then it's definitely one to check out. And that about wraps up this video. Thanks for watching everyone, we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider hitting that like button, or even subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I know I rambled on way longer this time than I usually do in videos like this, but to those who have watched the channel a lot before, you'll know that a big reason why I even play JRPGs is the atmosphere, and games that are big on the adventuring aspect just do this so well. Like, I'm the type of person who can put up with a mediocre story and gameplay as long as the atmosphere is compelling enough to me. It just so happens that every game on this list is excellent as a whole and some of my all-time favorites ever. So yeah, I've just been waiting to talk about some of these for a while and had a lot to say. What RPGs do you feel best capture that spirit of adventure though? Like I mentioned earlier, this is very subjective, so I'm sure there's a lot of other examples out there that could qualify that I didn't list here. Let us know in the comments below. As always, I just want to give a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. You guys are the best. All your support and generosity is very much appreciated. Also, shout out to Evan, my bro, for his dope editing skills as usual. Other than that, thanks again for watching everyone, and hope you have an awesome day. This is Corbin from Gaming Productions. Until next time.